of that in mental health, in the mental health system. I worked in a PHP IOP program doing adult and adolescent work with psychiatric and substance abuse work until I made the transition into pastoral counseling, where I predominantly focused on trauma resolution counseling. Helped start a counseling department in the church. We did a lot of equipping and training leaders in the church to be trauma informed inside of all of our ministries. We really believe that the body is the true hospital. And so, really equipping the people of God. And currently, kind of in some transitions, I recently, in the last year, have started a podcast with another GCBN member, Fern Sapp, where we talk there for our family caregivers, support there. And then I'm working on some books and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So, but I do love this panel. I've been a part of this now for a little over 3 years, and it's been an exceptional experience to get to be a part of this community. So, want to get started today with our scriptures, because today we are just talking about healthy communication. It is one of the most key things we do, because you'll hear me say a lot of the time that God is a God of relationship, and that's what it's all about, and everything else under the sun is a tool, right? But communication is one of our greatest tools, because it's how we build connection with one another. And so, first scripture today is James 1:19, and it said, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger." And Proverbs 15:1, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So that's what we'll be focusing on today. So to get started today, again, we are talking about that leadership shift. And today we're keeping comms clear, having healthy communication. And so healthy communication is one of the most influential leadership skills, both in business and in ministry and in your personal life and relationships also. And so it's super important. But the way we listen, the way we speak, respond, encourage others really shapes organizational culture. It strengthens relationships, and it helps build trust within our teams, right? That can be in ministry and in business and at home as a team, right? Um, an effective communication is an opportunity to inspire. It can provide clarity. It's a tool to resolve conflict and to cultivate environments where people can thrive. And so, as believers, our words and actions should consistently reflect wisdom, grace, and integrity, modeling the character of Christ. And so, my first question for us, Julie, as we get started today is, why is healthy communication so important in ministry and business?
Because people make too many assumptions,
That's
right?
good.
And those assumptions come from their background and then how they perceive you. So it's like the can on with the string, and you're going to hear something different on the other end, and how it lands on somebody, you just have no clue that
Mm,
it offended them, or you had no intention to offend. And so clear communication is letting them know where you're coming from. I'm sure you're going to go into this, but
mm,
also asking what they heard. Like, so,
mm.
so what, so where are we going from here? We've been talking for a while. Where are we going from here? And then that way you kind of know what's absorbed, what's not. So clear communication. And even when you're talking spiritually, like I had an issue with family, in that they thought I was being judgy.
Mm,
And because I was saying things like, look, you got to put this in God's hands. He's got this. And I was thinking I was being encouraging,
mm,
and it came across to them as being judgy.
mm.
And then there was a blow up, like it said,
Right.
like you were talking about. And so, we actually had to have a sit down to say, okay, this is my heart, and
Mm,
this is what I intended, and I'm so sorry that I offended you. Can you help me understand why it landed so badly? Like it went south really fast.
right.
So, and then once the clarity was there was love, there was a lightness, there was so much of God in it
Right.
that, yeah, that it was really good.
Sorry, multitasking with our online crew. So, a woman of many talents in one moment. Yeah, absolutely. It is, I love that too. too many assumptions. I Part of human nature, part of the way our brains are wired is when there's not communication, we are wired in neurologically and how we function to fill in the gap. The human brain does that. And so when we don't communicate, we fill in the gap, which is where the assumptions come from, sometimes on both sides of the fence, right? So if I haven't actually said it, if I have this expectation that my tone should have implied something, or that if I didn't speak the words and I didn't express something, uh, that people aren't gonna know. And what you speaking to what you spoke to, which we will talk to about a little bit too, is our sometimes our body language, our tone, our eye contact are communicating things our words are not. And so we do have to work on, sometimes it's incongruent for a lot of reasons, but and it does require clarification, but that's all part of healthy communication. The point is that we are actively leaning in and we're being intentional inside of that space. And why healthy communication? Because it really is the vehicle of relationship. It's what allows me to know you, and it's what allows you to know me, whether that's wants, needs, history, expectations. We can't just know those things about each other. Now, we as humans, we absorb a lot of information. We can observe a lot of things, and sometimes if we've been a study of a person or in relationship with somebody for a long time, we can have predictive patterns for what we expect they might think or say or want, and could be accurate a percentage of the time, right? But if we operate there that we just know and we assume that we know, it's going to lend itself to miscommunication, because at any given time we are growing, we are learning, we are changing as people. And so sometimes, even if you knew me well, something might mean something different to me today than it did yesterday. And so that's why we have to stay in active communication. And healthy communication creates safety, which is what it creates a foundation of safety and a foundation of trust, which matters for yourself, it matters in personal relationships, and it matters for the culture you're developing in your business and your ministry. So communication is one of the number one tools of developing trust and safety inside your organization, and it's going to set the tone for the expectation of how we treat each other. And you as a leader certainly have the running start of how we're going to set that tone. And even if you are an employee, I will tell you, there's this rule, there's this thing in psychology where, if you want people to meet you, you have to model it, right? It's kind of like when you're parenting. If your child's yelling and screaming, do you meet them in the yelling and the screaming if you want them to calm down? You know what you do?
Yeah.
You whisper. You whisper, right? Um, And so definitely you can model, because people will match tone. That's one of those things about communication, is sometimes when we model it, it can create this matching experience, this mirroring experience. And so that's something to keep in mind, because we really can set the tone of a conversation. So good for healthy communication. So, first thing we're going to talk about today, we've got four kind of areas we're going to jump into, but the first one is listen to understand. I will tell you, when it comes to communication, so many people think it's about talking, but the number one thing about communication is, oh, I don't love cliches, but this idea that God gave us two ears and one mouth, there is a reality. It is more important to listen than to speak. And so, only cliche, hopefully you get from me, because I'm not a cliche girl. But anyway, listening to understand, not simply to respond. And so, I want to talk about healthy communication begins with intentional listening, right? Effective leaders seek to understand before they offer solutions, which creates an environment for people to feel heard, valued, respected. And active listening includes your full attention, right? You're listening with your mind, your ears, your eyes, full attention, maintaining appropriate eye contact, asking thoughtful questions, and resisting the urge to interrupt or formulate your own response while someone is speaking. When leaders listen, they build trust, reducing unnecessary conflict, and you typically make wiser decisions. So my question, and I'll talk a little bit more about active listening, but why is it important when someone is speaking to you that you are fully present and listening to understand? And why is that important in business and ministry?
You know, I've been all over the board. I think most people have in their leadership and how they lead. And one of the things we would do with Body of Health is I had, therapists that worked with me and management staff and that kind of thing.
Right.
And just making sure that we're all on the same page, that we're all, the level of care, what's the next continuing education, that we all need to work together in synergy. And one of the things that I did wrong in the beginning was I lectured and just told them this is how it is, not knowing and realizing that the first thing I needed to do was ask each person what would be their ideal massage clinic. What would that look like to them?
Hmm.
And getting the input from everyone. Now,
Right.
all of us were on the same page. We
Right.
all wanted the same thing. However, my delivery of it, my communication style was that of authority, of pushing my agenda. So, I got pushback on that, and I didn't get that synergy.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I shifted it and had each therapist run a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
it changed because then they were able to say, oh, this is what she's trying to say, or oh, that. And it made a huge difference. So that's why it's important when someone is speaking that you're fully present and listening, because if you're talking, you're not listening. And
Mm-hmm.
you're not, you just don't know the heart of where people are. And that was my experience.
It's really interesting because they've done a lot of research in whether the brain can actually multitask or not. We use that word multitasking, right? And really what multitasking is it's not our ability to do multiple things at one time, because what they have found neurologically is we actually cannot do multiple things at one time besides the autonomic stuff like breathing, right? Um, but what it really is it's code switching. Like, it's our ability to it's the pace at which our brain can switch between tasks, which is actually the measure of multitasking. And the reason I bring that up is because we can't actually be actively engaged in the thinking part of talking while we're in the listening part of talking. And so, because our brains aren't actually capable of that. That is not a we don't multitask. And so, and the parts of you it takes to formulate a response hinder your ability to hear. And it doesn't mean you don't physically hear sound. It doesn't mean that but am I actively hearing? Because hearing involves a lot of things, right? Like when I'm hearing, I am not just hearing the words. That's part of it. I'm hearing the actual words being spoken when I'm listening actively, right? But when I'm listening actively, I'm also hearing the tone of voice, right? The tone may be communicating something to me. We listen with our eyes, right? Anywhere, different studies say different things, but anywhere from 50 to 90% of our communication is body language. You don't assess body language with your ears. You do that with your eyes, right? Um, and so we we are listening because it requires all of us. And it requires your brain to be able to put all those pieces of information together. The words, what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, we're weaving that together and we're interpreting that. And if we're busy responding, we're not doing that effectively, right? Because again, what are we? We're not good multitaskers. Right? Our system isn't actually set up that way. And so when we're actively listening to be fully present, and the reality is when we're fully present, like if I'm not when I'm on my phone, I try really hard to put my phone down if I absolutely can in a situation, right? Like obviously I'm a counselor, sometimes emergency stuff comes in. I'm a little aware. It's one of the reasons I do keep a watch on my wrist, because I can look at that without being so disruptive, right? I can be in a session and take a quick glance if there's an emergency, but I don't have to fully focus and get things out. Because the other thing with active listening is there can be obstacles. It's really fun. It's not funny, but I learned this the hard way, right? Um, that in communication, when we don't feel safe, sometimes there are barriers, and sometimes we bring barriers, and things like phones can be a barrier when we're communicating. And so when you're not actually speaking on the phone, is what I mean. So when you are face to face with a person, but so just that being fully present also helps people to feel cared about. It helps them to feel heard even before you ever speak, right? Because they are reading your body language, they are reading your presence in a room. And sometimes presence can be half the battle to someone healing and feeling heard. Um, and so just something to think about. Another thing to think about, I teach a lot about reflective listening. This is a skill I teach with marriage and parenting a lot. And this can be really beneficial in business and ministry because you're usually dealing with two sets of people if you're dealing with business and ministry. You're dealing with the people who are working with you and for you, and we're dealing with the people that you're serving. And so you are dealing with two people groups. And so you have two opportunities where communication, conflict resolution, um, the need to care for people arises in two fronts. And so you kind of have double duty in communication when you're talking about business and ministry. And so reflective listening it's a great skill. It can feel kind of cheesy to people, but I will tell you, we learn all kinds of things about communication growing up. And not all of it's healthy, right? We learn what was modeled for us. We also react and respond to the trauma experiences we may have had as children that may have influenced how we communicate, whether we stay silent, whether we are reactive, we're interruptive, whether we withhold information. All of those things can be impacted in our communication cycles. But reflective listening is the idea that if Julie and I are talking, if I'm person A and you're person B, and I'm person A and I'm speaking, what that means is Julie is fully listening, right? And before person B has permission to talk, before Julie's going to speak, she's going to say, "What I hear you saying is." Now, rule of thumb, do not parrot a person because that feels condescending, right? So if I say the sky is blue, Julie says, "I hear you say the sky is blue." Right? That kind of parroting people actually read as disrespect. So we want to be mindful of that. But if I say to Julie, "Oh my gosh, I had so much going on," which I totally did the last couple of weeks, right? Like I had one ABCDE happening, and I'm exhausted and da da da. You know, Julie's way of being able to say she wants to tell me what she heard. She's checking in with me that she heard me accurately. "Wow, Jess, what I hear you saying is you've had a really overwhelming couple weeks. There was a lot going on that you had some strong feelings about." That is a mirror, like that is a I've heard what you've said, but I've also interpreted a little bit of what you said. Is that right? Am I catching that? And what it does when we do that, when we check in that we've heard right, and we offer that person the ability to correct anything, right? "Well, yeah, you mostly got it, but I think what I'm really just saying is," right? It gives that person the opportunity. So person B does not give their response, their personal response yet. They say, "Here's what I'm hearing. Is that right?" And that gives person A the chance to correct anything that might have been miscommunicated, right? And we finish checking that. And once we know it's right, now it's person B's turn to respond, right? So Julie can say, "Now that you really know that's what I meant and what I think, well, here's what I would do, or here's how I would wrap around." And I have to do the same thing as person A. "Yeah, so what I really hear you saying is I should do ABC." And Julie says, "Yeah, that's kind of what I mean, but you might want to try this." "Oh, okay. So what you really mean is I should do ABC." "Yeah, yeah, that's it. That's what I want you to do." And so the reflective listening part is that we listen fully present, but we check in that we've accurately heard the intent, not just the words. That we've heard the intent of the message. And once it's been clarified that I've received that, then it's my turn to respond. And that person has a responsibility to check in that they've heard me. Now, Can that feel really tedious sometimes? Yes. But it is a skill that you can practice, and especially if you're dealing with parenting where communication has been shut down, or in marriages where communication has been shut down or challenging, that skill is really, really, really important. I don't care how cheesy it sounds, and it's cheesy when it feels awkward. It is less cheesy when we've practiced it enough for it to become a part of our own language, right? It's cheesy when we're in the script part of it because 'cause we're not used to talking that way, but our own words form our responses when we practice it enough, and so it gets more natural the more you practice it, but it is a good habit to check in, and that's especially true in business because you got a lot of things going on. You got people you each have your own personal stuff, but then you also have work stuff. And not that you're there to talk about all your personal stuff all the time, but we know we've been at this long enough that our personal can affect our business stuff, right? And so um, that's why that can be such an effective tool. And I'll tell you, if you want to know more about it, you can certainly look it up. It's not difficult to find reflective listening practices. And so that you can even get on the Google and probably read a little bit more about it if you would like to learn a little bit more about it. So, any other thoughts about listening, Julie?
I had a question,
Sure.
and I don't know if I'm going to go off on a tangent with this or not, but one of the things that popped up for me when you're talking about reflective listening is you don't know people's triggers. And you might say something very, very common,
Mhm.
and it's a trigger, like you need to.
Mhm.
That could be a trigger, or why don't you do? And
Mhm.
that maybe that either they've had experiences in their personal life or with their business, in other, having other managers or whatever, and
Mhm.
it didn't end well, but then you don't know. So can you help us with triggers when we don't know what they are?
So that's a two-side what you just shared with us is a two-sided thing. So, um, and there's responsibility on both people's part because we all have a history. I tell people all the time, we live in a broken world. You know, none of us really escapes having been impacted, right? I do a lot of trauma counseling, and for us, trauma is anything that contradicted your beliefs, values, and expectations that caused loss for you that didn't get resolved. And and so when we think about that, what that means, the way trauma memory is stored in the brain is it's stored as an active threat because there was no resolution. So the brain, anything that reminds the brain of that event can trigger because that is an active field, active memory in the brain that that kind of thing is not safe because safety was never reestablished. And so which you can work on that with your counselor and work on trauma, resolving trauma, and doing some of that to get the neurological piece addressed. But we're not going down there right this second. But so it is my responsibility. It is not our fault what happened to us, but it is our responsibility to be aware of it, to partner with God in the process of healing, because it's going to impact the quality of our life and the quality of our relationships. And so, if I'm doing that, then that's that being aware that I have sensitive spots. And I have to be aware that the people in front of me are not, I may get triggered, but that I have to do the work in myself that you're not responsible, right? There are things I can do, skills I can learn to go, okay, what happened here? And so part of it would be my responsibility would be to check in and say, "Hey, Julie, what that kind of hit me kind of funny, and I recognize it may not be what you meant. Can you talk to me more about what you meant?" So if I'm on the receiving end, I can clarify. I can be honest, like that hit me some kind of way, and I recognize it may not have been your intent. And it may be me, it may be my stuff hitting me. So I wanna clarify. I wanna hear more from you and clarify what does that mean? So that's how I can take ownership as the person who may have been triggered. Um, on the other side, if we know that we have triggered somebody, it's okay to circle back. It can be a kindness for us to circle back around because a lot of times we can visibly tell something may have triggered somebody. You know, their body language, they may be shut down. All of a sudden, their arms may be crossed. They're looking down. They won't make eye contact with you. And if they don't have it in them, depending on what the trauma is or how reactive they are, we can circle back around in love and kindness and say, I recognize that maybe I just communicated something that landed not so well for you. Can we talk about that? I want to make sure we're on the same page, and let's talk about what was said or how it was said, and how did it land. Um, and so it doesn't mean I have to draw back from my intent immediately, but I'm seeking to understand, right? That's an exploratory process, but it's one that offers kindness, right? And so I can circle back and say, I can see that landed really hard. I want to better understand what it was about what I said or how I said it that landed that way. Um, and what that meant to you. And that in and of itself is a type of communication. It could be a little bit conflict resolution. It may not That trigger may have had nothing to do with you, but it still may help a person resolve a little bit, and it continues to build connection. The other thing I would say about the person, like if you are the one that person is reacting to, uh, good leadership is there are certain sentence stems that lead better for less defensiveness. That One of the things I love the best is that communication is a tool you can always grow and practice in. It is not, we talk about gifts and talents. We're born with gifts and talents, right? That the Lord has put in us. But some of us are more naturally, we have different gifts and talents that allow us to be more sensitive and aware to communication. But the reality is communication is a skill. It can be practiced, it can be learned, it can be honed. Whether you feel like you're good at it or not, you always have the potential to get better. I'm a big believer personally that every person we meet is God's great kindness. Sometimes it's a difficult kindness, as an opportunity to continue to grow in our communication and understanding. And so, like, I would be using I statements. I statements is like communication 101. I feel blank when this behavior occurs, right? So if I'm in a leadership position, I might say, I feel somewhat confused and a little bit frustrated when we are not following the policies that have been put in place. Can we talk about where the disruption is happening? Instead of saying, "Why aren't you doing that?" Right? Like, or when we use you language, we're immediately putting someone's heckles up, right? Because it's defensive language. And that doesn't mean there's not, I mean, if is it going to happen sometimes? Yes, especially in very emergent situations, things like that. And it's not really about coddling, it's about keeping communication open. Because if we're fighting a war of defensiveness, we're not actually solving a problem. And so if I come at it and say, here's another good one is I'm observing. I'm observing these things are happening. Can you tell me more about that? We use the language of exploratory questions to lead into difficult conversations. Or if we need to share something with somebody that may be difficult for them to take on. And so one of the things, especially like if someone's behavior and their commitment is if there's a gap between the two, one of the communication skills is, I hear you saying you really wanting to grow in your health and your wellness, but I also see where these things have continued to be a part of your life. Can we tell me more about the space between those things and what's happening in the space between those things, right? It's a way to help in their own words and their own behavior to say, "Can you help me understand what this is?" Instead of assuming or instead of attaching labels to it, because a lot of times people will be like, "Well, that's just lazy." I'm even careful sometimes with the word. Don't be wrong. And as humans, do we make plenty of excuses? We do. I'm careful with that word when I'm talking to people because a lot of times those spaces where excuses are occurring can often be the places that are trauma points in a person's life. So either trauma has happened or their survival is a part of what's disrupting and where those excuses may be coming from. And so the language of approach to them, if I'm coming alongside them, is going to be more, let's talk about the gap. You're wanting this, and this is what's happening. Can you tell me more about what's happening in the middle? What are the challenges? What are the strengths? You know, is this something you've had trouble with before? Because that exploratory space, it's going to help them feel partnered with, um, and encouraged, because a lot of times when people are struggling with something, they they already know they're struggling. And so a lot of times, even Christians, even believers, I see this a lot in the church, even with, I work with people who in trauma who've been believers and leaders in the church for 20, 30 years and still struggling with certain things. And so, and afraid to tell people because they're afraid they're going to be judged about that, even though they've been a believer for so long, right? And so it's that coming alongside, because a lot of times, most people, by the time they even see a counselor, have tried to get help 6 other places, 5 to
Wow,
6 other
really?
places, whether that's friends, family, pastors, right? So most people are aware they have a sensitive space. A lot of times they just don't know how to fix it, and they can feel hopeless if we just come at them and say, "Fix it." And so that language of coming alongside them and saying, "I need to understand the problem with you so we can brainstorm solutions together." That kind of language can be really helpful in business and in ministry. And we have a lot more room in ministry because there's a lot more of a culture of grace and mercy oftentimes in ministry for us to make room for that. But it is something for us to think about as leaders, and we can't always control corporate cultures when we're in them and things like that. If you are the owner or the leader, you can set some corporate culture around how we handle that. And it's a delicate balancing act because we also have to create safety and consistency, because it's important about what's happened to you, but that cannot also be permission for laissez-faire, right? Like, I have to create safety for all the other employees who are completing their tasks and meeting goals and deadlines, and so it is a delicate balancing act, but I can create a culture that I'm gonna treat you as a person first, and I'm at least gonna attempt to understand while we brainstorm solutions. But that doesn't mean we don't have boundaries and that there may not be, spaces where we have to make hard decisions. So, does that does that help answer that question? I don't
It
know.
does. So what I hear you
What?
saying
Mhm.
is for the layperson, it is about, because we don't know. I mean, you say things so eloquently that didn't even cross my mind how you say things. So for the layperson that hasn't had your training, it's about asking more questions
Mm,
and being vulnerable enough to say, "Help me understand,"
yes,
instead of jumping to a conclusion and pointing a finger. Just say, I recognize that this didn't
mhm,
land well, that you're not acting yourself. So can you talk
absolutely,
to me more about that? Is what I'm hearing you say.
absolutely. I would say the number one skill I've probably implemented, like teaching parents when I've worked with thousands of families, like working in the hospital and things like that, is just that. And in really in any leadership capacity, because if you don't have it all, you can learn the basics, listening and body language, all that. But outside of that, the next best thing you can learn to do is how to ask exploratory questions, because it helps keep you out of the space of assumption and it gives you much more knowledge, while also showing that you care and you're willing to lean in and you're willing to understand before you draw conclusions. And even in therapy, there's a lot of research about the effectiveness of therapy, and um, positive regard, that ability to be present and have positive regard and empathy automatically makes patients and clients feel 50% better. That has nothing to do with my training. That just has to do, and it doesn't just apply to me as a counselor. Any of us can do that. I can sit and be present and have empathy, and that already is gonna help somebody feel 50% better.
Awesome.
And they don't have to go to a counselor for that to be true. That could be true in your businesses. That could be true in your churches, right? And so, I mean, yes, I've got a little more training about what positive regard is, but the idea of exploratory questions allows us to have positive regard with somebody, because it's the act of leaning in and attempting to understand. It's showing and demonstrating I'm willing to take what I think and what I perceive and set it right here and let you give me some more understanding from your perspective before I share anything, right? Which already make helps people to feel better partnered with, as opposed to you're over here and I'm over here on opposing sides of something. And so absolutely, if you don't go any further, learning how to have good exploratory questions and be present, some of the best things you can do. And so, all right, we're going to move into the body language part of this conversation because it's super important. So, um, your delivery shapes your message, right? So, communication is more than words we choose, it's also expressed through our tone, through our facial expressions, our body language, and our posture. A message intended to encourage can easily be misunderstood if delivered with impatience, distraction, frustration. Healthy leaders communicate with consistency, self-awareness, emotional regulation, ensuring both their verbal and nonverbal communication reflect respect and professionalism. Our delivery should reinforce the message rather than undermine it. Um, oh, there it is. Oh, it was like my question disappeared in the dark. So, um, So the question is, how do we work to regulate our tone, body language, and overall communication and presence during difficult conversations? So before we answer that, I am going to say this. Like I said a little bit ago, research shows you'll see different stats. You'll generally see at least 50 to 70%, but some studies will even say as much as up to 85 or 90% of communication is body language. So we are communicating so much more than just the actual words that are coming out of our mouth. We have communication's very dynamic. And so our tone of voice, our eye contact, our facial expressions, the posture of our body are all communicating alongside the actual words that are coming out of our mouth. So keeping that in mind, how do we work to regulate those things and why is it important to do that?
Hold your breath and count to 10. Hesitate before you speak. Um, I'm guilty of tone. My tone. My husband says it all the time. I was like, "What? I told you I love you." And he goes, "It was your tone." You know what I mean?
Yep.
I love you. Like whatever. I- and it's so true.
Mhm.
I'm snippy and heading out the door. Love you. It's just the tone of it that you want to go to dinner. We'll go out somewhere. It's the tone.
Mhm.
It's like you don't want to go to dinner. And actually, no, I didn't want to go to dinner, but I'm willing to go to dinner if you really want to go to dinner. And it's not that I'm mad at you. You know what I mean? So it leads
Mhm.
this whole thing. It just with that little bit of tone. And it's like, would you quit telling me I have a tone? I'm only answering your question. It's so frustrating. And to regulate it, what I have found is at least count to three before responding
Mhm.
because, it can make a big difference.
Absolutely. I I love your example of that. It's actually a really perfect example about why that happens, right? Because your tone communicated, I don't really want to go out, but I'm willing to go for you. But he didn't hear those words. So the tone, because it's a weird thing, because as that person, that's where the tone is coming from, is that real thought behind it, right? But
Hmm.
when that person hears the tone, they didn't hear the message behind it. I mean, they heard there was something behind it, but they didn't actually hear what your real need was behind it, right? And so it's actually that was actually a perfect example about why that miscommunication happens, because what would it be if I said, I'm not really feeling going out, but I'm willing to go for you? That would change the nature of the conversation, right? Like, because it would help your need be expressed, but and also your willingness to make the sacrifice, which totally changes the outcome of that conversation if we added those words. And but that tone is how the unspoken stuff gets communicated with our bodies talking, even when our mouth is not. Right. And so that was actually a really perfect example of that. So
I told you I'm guilty. I'm so guilty of it.
we, you are not alone. We all are. And I'll say this, we all have different personality types, and that alone is going to impact how we communicate also. We talked about how trauma can impact how we communicate, but personality types communicate differently also, right?
Yeah,
People
when you have
who
that wheel,
Mhm.
the D,
The
I,
this, mhm.
all that.
Yep.
I am definitely all leadership,
All up in the top. Yep.
domineering, all that. And my husband is the thinker,
Yep.
processing it,
Yep.
all that kind of. So yeah, personalities definitely
Yes, it
play a
does.
huge role in the tone.
Yes, it does. Because people who are the disc, you have your D's and your I's, your dominants and your influencers, and they are extra. I mean, essentially, people above that line in the top half of the circle are they're extroverts. They process out loud. So they didn't do a ton of thinking in their mind before they said it. They just how they process is to say it out loud to people, which means it often comes a little unfiltered. Right? Because it hasn't been through a process yet. And here's the truth, a lot of those people are married to the opposite. And so you're married to the more introverted people who introverts people think a lot of times introvert extrovert is just about whether we like to hang out with people or not, and that's not actually not true. Introversion and extroversion has a lot to do with how we process information. And so introverts process information internally, where extroverts process information externally. And so introverts have had more like they need the space, which is why a lot of times, even in communications, another part of communication, extroverts want a response right now. I asked you a question that may require, it may be a deep question, and extroverts are like, tell me right now. And introverts are like, I need a minute to actually go in myself and search out that answer before I can speak it to you because they don't talk their process out loud. And so that's where personality impacts communication a lot too. But when I think about your body language, tone of voice, um, there's a lot to be aware of, right? Like I could sit here and tell you, I'm not mad at you. You don't believe that. You don't believe that for a second, right? We wanna have open language, it's a weird spot. When we cross our legs and arms when we're talking to people, it's a closed position, right? We're closing ourselves off, and so, when we think about that, part of it's hard when you're communicating because some of us more naturally sit with our legs crossed, or we cross our arms just for comfort, or if we're cold, or, you know, I always as a counselor, I've always had to be mindful, don't cross both at the same time because some of it's natural. I'm a leg crosser. When I used to run groups and I sat in a group, I crossed my legs all the time. But I was always consciously aware, like, don't be closed, don't be closed, don't be closed, right? You can't be closed off. But I also had to find the balance because if I was so in my head about not being closed, but I was uncomfortable, it took away from me being present. So I don't want you to do that, but we do need to be mindful. So obviously, if someone is saying the words, but their body is all closed off, I might need to pause whatever my intent is. And that's another place to lean in and explore, right? Because if somebody's body language is closed off, I might need to understand what's happening here because your words are saying you hear me, but your body's telling me I'm not receiving what you're hearing, what you're telling me. And so let's talk about that. I can see something about what I'm sharing with you isn't landing for you. Can you talk to me about that?
And you hope that they respond. You
Sure.
hope that they're open to response.
Well,
Because we're talking about it from a leadership point of view.
mhm.
And uh, I did have some sit downs with some therapists because I realized that some things were going awry, and they were unwilling to respond. So look, this is your chance. Let me know what's happening here so we can make some adjustments, and they'd just walk out.
Mhm.
It is. So from and you're seeing the body language and you're having conversations, what do you do when you do not get a response? Do you pray about it and
I think you have
and just leave it where it is? Or there you are.
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Um, so I think you have to have wisdom. I think you partner with the Holy Spirit always in all that you do, and you always talk to God. Here's the reality. People being closed off it, there can be a momentary, let's see, we're getting a little glitchy. Um, anyway, so there can be a momentary piece to that where in the moment someone's offended by something and it's not landing. But there can also be a space where um people can be offended in the moment and being closed off, but people can also there can be a cumulative problem happening. Right. And so if you a lot of times you're more likely to have a non-response if it's cumulative or if someone is having a really strong trauma response. Those tend to be the two things that are often landing when people are not responding. Um, and a lot of times, another reason they may not always respond is if they don't feel safe, which those two things lend themselves to, right? If they're having a trauma response, they don't feel safe. If they if there's a cumulative problem, that means safety has been breaking down over time for some reason. And so part of it, we have to have wisdom about it because we may be able to continue conversation and explore what's really going on underneath this, or we might need to take a pause and say, I recognize that um, things for us are not really landing right now. Why don't we take a beat? Take some time and plan to come back. And during that time, here's what I'm going to do. And during that time, here's what I'm going to ask you to do so that we can come back because I really do want to hear from you. It's important to me to know and understand. I don't want this to be this way. Um, but I'll need to know. And if it doesn't go from there, just like scripture says, we escalate up, right? Like if we can't resolve it, and if part of not resolving it is shutting down, then I may seek out a third party, right? The appropriate third party in ministry, business, personal, whatever that is, whoever that is, because it's different in those different organizations, right? But I can one exercise wisdom. I can recognize and say, I don't want you to feel like you can't communicate with me. Are there any reasons you feel like you can't share this answer with me? That's a place to start. It's a hard question to ask because it's an honest one, right? And it may mean I'm hearing things about myself I don't want to hear, or I may not like, or it may require further exploration of myself. But if my goal is genuine connection and reconciliation, I do have to do the work of leaning in. And so it's a great space to say, I recognize that, and I've been honest sometimes, like, I recognize that you might feel really shut down right now. Is that right? You know? And they'll even if they won't answer you, sometimes the body language, like you'll get that half a nod or it's there. But and I may just say, can we talk about that for a minute? Can you tell me a little bit about what made you feel shut down? You know? Um, and if they say no, then I say, well, it is really important to me that we can move forward, but I recognize that we might need a break. And so here's what I'm willing to go away and do. I'm willing to go away and make some space for the idea that you may have some hard things to tell me, and that I want to listen really well. So I'm going to make sure I come back really ready to hear you, and really willing to hear hard stuff, even about me. I can set the tone because I'm creating safety when I do that. Um, and and I'll say this, we're all on a spectrum, even as leaders, we may have our own stuff. So that may mean we're talking to our own coaches and counselors to receive that difficult information in that hard place. But so there are ways to lean into that, and work through it. But it again is that exploratory place. I have to be willing to explore what else is actually happening in this conversation that the words are not saying. And so again, we're back. It always goes back to that. I can't know. I can only assume with the data I have if I don't know. And so instead of assuming, my rule of thumb is get more data. Get more data because you're more likely to have a better outcome with more data. That's a rule of research anyway. The more data you have, the more accurate it's likely to be. Rule of thumb in the research world. Okay. Um, so just just continue to lean in it. And sometimes it takes practice and sometimes you're going to get it wrong and it's going to be a little clunky and we may owe each other apologies. But it's okay to take a timeout. It's okay to seek moderation if I need it. If I need a moderator, a mediator in the middle of that, if it escalates to that, it's okay because sometimes the outcome is helpful, right? I mean, why do so many coaches get hired by businesses? Sometimes they're coming in to be the mediator wherever the elephant or the stuck point is because we've lost the ability to communicate. So there's whole industries because sometimes we need it. Sometimes we need that space. And being aware of that even in your own business. You may need that coach, right? I know we've had Dr. Dawn on here in the last month. You know, that's one of the things she does, and several people in our GCBN community do. And so just being aware that it is okay as a leader to say, you know, hey, I think we might need somebody else to join us in this conversation. And something to keep in mind as an employer, obviously people have mixed feelings about the HR space, the HR protecting the company, protecting the employee. Where's the real, alliance? And being mindful as a leader that most employees look at HR as an alliance to the company. And so if I need to have those conversations and I want to support people, how do we engage that mediation process where we all feel represented in a healthy way? And so that's where sometimes hiring that outside third party can be helpful, because they're going to come with the intent for everybody and the best for the company or the ministry, but they're also going to have a little bit more perspective about all the players in the game. So that are a little less biased probably. So just being mindful about that. So I may combine these last couple sections because we have two more, but we've kind of been talking about this anyway, that words build culture. And so the words spoken by leaders help define the culture in an organization. Healthy communication intentionally encourages, corrects with grace, expresses appreciation, and recognizes strengths and contributions of others. Even difficult conversations can strengthen relationships when they are rooted in honesty, respect, and genuine desire to help people grow. Leaders who consistently speak life cultivate environments where people feel safe, motivated, and empowered to succeed. And here's what I will say, and I'm going to read the second part, is that matters because even if you're having a conflict with one employee, how you handle that and how you communicate that is going to affect safety for all of your employees. So it is a delicate balancing act. It's why you can't let things go unignored when there's a problem, because you will lose really good people because then they stop feeling safe when there are things unaddressed, situations unaddressed. So, um, and I'm going to couple this culture thing with the second part, which is communicate truth, grace, and purpose. That's one of the goals of communication. So healthy communication is both truthful and compassionate. As believers, we are called to speak with integrity, addressing challenges directly while extending grace and preserving the dignity of others. Before speaking, consider whether your words are true, necessary, beneficial, or timely. That is a great test. That pause Julie was talking about taking, it's better to not just pause. It's better to ask myself, is what I'm about to say true? Is it necessary? Is it beneficial? And is it on time? Is it the right time to be saying it? If you can teach yourself to ask yourself those things, that will also help take some of that raw reaction emotion out of it. And it helps clarify intent when we're communicating. So what is true? What is necessary? What is beneficial? And is it the right time? Right? Um, and so communication that is guided by wisdom and purpose strengthens relationships. It helps resolve conflicts effectively and reflects Christ in both business and ministry. So, um, how do we ensure that we speak um, words that reflect truth and consistency and grace and purpose? And why is that important?
Scripture, spending time with God, reading his word, and letting the Holy Spirit dwell within you will
Yeah.
give you those things.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you're leaning in on worldly um, philosophies
Mhm.
and um, yeah, the world is crazy. So, speaking the truth, well, the main truth is the Bible.
Right.
So it's got to be rooted in scripture. It's rooted in your soul,
Mm.
and who in our salvation.
Yeah.
So if we don't have that relationship, that they call it doing church. If we're just doing church, showing up, for your hour and a half and saying hello to people and leaving, and not growing and surrounding yourself with other Christians and whatnot. That's what I love about GCBN, is that we're all in business, and we're all striving to do the same thing, but it all is rooted in Scripture, bringing Christ back in business. And so that's Beth's heart. She saw there was a need. She saw
Right.
that there were a lot of people struggling because world was pushing back, push back, push back.
Right.
And so yeah, so that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I think we have to know the truth to live the truth. Because I think one of the things about communication is it is the truth in action, is the reality. I mean, communication is going to be the number one place that people can look at you and see the light and the salt of the earth. How you communicate, how you show up, how you are present with a person. I mean, you could do all kinds of things for people, right? Like you could do 100 things. You could pay bills for people, you could take care of things for people, you can come alongside them in hard times, and all of those things matter. They matter because they communicate. But it's one thing if I showed up and brought you dinner and I leaned in with kindness and understanding. It's another if I showed up and brought you dinner and said, "Here you go." Because did I negate that act of service with my communication? And so communication is coupled with any action we take in our lives and in the lives of others. And so it's really important because it communicates intent. It communicates our heart, right? Like even scripture says the mouth will speak what the heart what's in the heart, right? And so that's true with people. That's not just true to God. Like it's not just God saying, "I know your heart by what's coming out of your mouth," right? Like people know your heart by what's coming out of your mouth. And don't be wrong, we have bad days. Okay? We are hungry, we are hangry sometimes. We are exhausted sometimes. And do those things impact our ability to be intentionally communicating all the time? Yes. Yes,
Of
it does.
course. Yeah.
Of course it does, right? And so we need to have grace for ourselves sometimes, and sometimes we just need to be able to communicate, "Hey, I'm not good. I'm not good right now. I'm not okay today." I used to laugh when I was a teenager because I could tell when my mom was coming at me with something, and I would just tell her, "You just need to let me go to bed. Let me go to bed." And I would literally go get in my bed, like, "Let me go to bed." And she'd wanna keep I said, "No, let me go to bed and let's talk about this tomorrow." Right? Because we know ourselves. I knew if I continued those conversations with my mom in that space, it wasn't gonna go well. We would end up in unnecessary conflict because I knew I did not have the emotional capacity because I was too tired, right? It is okay. I will say rule of thumb, don't ever walk away from a conversation just because. At least communicate, even if you're mad. Communicate. I need time to decompress and reconsider what we've discussed here. I need time. But that's a whole lot different than just storming off. If we go silent and we kinda stonewall and walk away, right? Um, it is better than saying what we don't mean, but I will tell you, one sentence of communication can go a long way to further to prevent further breakdown. It can create we can be angry and still create safety and security for both of us. I can need a break and still create safety and security for both of us. I may need the security of taking a break so I don't say what I don't mean because I'm mad, right? But I can create the security by going to take the break, but I create security for Julie by telling her there's a lot that's happened in here that I need to think about and I need to cool off because I really don't. And so I'll come back, but I need to take a break. Or just I need to take a break and take some time to think. Because I've at least created security for her that she's heard and she knows I'm going somewhere. And the thing about taking a break is we don't take a break without the invitation of we're coming back to re-engage this conversation.
I was just gonna ask you that. Yeah,
Yeah,
you gotta give a time frame to come back,
right.
yeah.
So when you take a break, it's I'm taking a break and here's when I'm coming back. 2 sentences. You don't have to be happy. You can be raging mad. 2 sentences, create security and continue to fuel connection even when you need to take a break, even if you're triggered, like, we can take that space. And will we hit situations sometimes where somebody's so shut down and so triggered? Yes, those will happen. But if we implement these skills as a whole, we will see a better byproduct across the general experience, and we will continue to grow in how to handle the more difficult ones even when we implement those. So, exploratory questions key. We gotta be good listeners. We have to listen, fully listen. Listen to understand. Be aware of our body language because our bodies are saying all kinds of things. And I'll tell you, if your body is telling people other things than what your mouth is, might be a place to lean in and ask God. And it may be a place to we might need to do a little self-exploration. And for any of us, we've all got wounded places. That may be a place we need a little extra help with because we may find that we are reacting to people and that may not be our heart and what we want in those relationships. And so all of the time this is about exploring because it's an opportunity. God is a God of healing and he's a God of restoration. He wants us to have good and healthy relationships with him, with ourselves, with each other. And so none of it's about condemnation. It's about the opportunity to assess and explore and lean into what he has for us. So, my call to action this week, last thing, is this week I'm going to encourage you to intentionally encourage 3 people this week by recognizing a specific strength, contribution, or area of growth you genuinely appreciate about that person. So, 3 people, I want you to encourage them by recognizing a specific strength or contribution or growth that you genuinely appreciate that you're recognizing in that person. So that's my call to action to you guys this week. Any last closing thought, Julie?
This was very insightful. It really brought up a lot of things. I'm a partner with the LifeWave company and love it. It's able to help people with something that has no medicine in it. So I love it. And it's about building team, and it's about customers, and it's about so being a leader and being a person that is knowledgeable about what it is. So this has helped tremendously on building my team. And because one of the big questions is, what holds you back?
Mm.
Why are you not sharing this? If you've experienced such a great outcome from using the patches, you know, is there a reason that you're not sharing it? And, would you like for me to talk to these people? But they're very protective of them. So getting, drilling down to those fears and just talking about them, it would be great. So this has helped me tremendously. Thank you.
Good. Well, I would love to tell you guys I know all the things you need to do. I don't. I kind of last minute found out Lisa wasn't going to be with us today because she had some special things going on with her kids. So I will say this. I know that God Golf and Girls is coming up in August. We're about a month out, a little over a month. I also know that we have our quarterly meeting. I think that's coming up not this weekend, but the following weekend. So I know you can register for all these events. You can get connected through the website. Um, so I know every Monday we're here for prayer. Tuesday, I apologize. I don't know who's coming next Tuesday. And I know next week, Julie, you take the lead next week in our Living Well.
Actually, Chi Chi and I switched because I'll be out of town.
Oh,
So Dr. Chi
okay.
Chi will be here next week. Hmm.
Okay. Well, there you go. There you have it.
And
Um,
the quarterly meeting is on the 18th.
yes.
Yep.
So you want to get registered for that. And there's even an opportunity to register people who may not be a part of GCBN as an opportunity to get them connected and let them explore what this community can look like. So reach in, see what those opportunities are to get connected. And we look forward to seeing you guys again next week. So you guys take care. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you.
Great job.